Hello, and welcome back to the 1904 Club. We've sacked off Smales from yesterday. He's been banished. He's been sacked, and he's gone. I'm back, joined today by Prutts and Kathyrn. Fletch might join us from some basement somewhere in Spain, but we'll have to wait and see. Kathyrn, how are you?
I'm all right, Baz. So you've sacked James as well, and he's looking for a job with Ruben, is he? Maybe he'll be the new manager.
Yeah, that could happen. Smales, he likes 4-4-2. Smales is very much like Mike Bassett. So he plays 4-4-2.
That could be interesting, definitely.
Yeah. Speaking of another Mike Bassett wannabe, Prutts, how are you?
If only. I'm good. Yeah, I thought we might have a little bit of a quiet period when you were pestering us for pods, and then you see the news and you go, "Oh right, yeah, that's why a chat's needed." So yeah, all good, good my end, but never a dull moment, is it? Never dull in Hull, which I'm sure is something Ola Ain has never said. But anyway, moving swiftly on, Kathyrn.
Don't talk to me, honestly. I'm fuming. Do you know what? Like, it really put me in a bad mood yesterday, and it was only one comment of him saying, "Have you ever been?" It really, I don't know if he was aiming to touch a nerve. It worked.
For the uninitiated, Ola Aina, I think it's fair to say was a bit of a lone flop at Hull City. I've done an interview in the Daily Mail.
No, Kathyrn, what was he at City? Go on.
I did say before we started he was absolutely useless. And I'm very much aware that he might be playing Champions League football next season. And well done to him on that. You know, he's obviously improved a lot, but it wasn't a great loan spell with us, I have to say.
And Prutts, how did you describe his shorts?
Well, I mean, he plays with the shorts. The top of the elastic. Everyone picture this: the elasticated top of the shorts kind of nestle a good 4 or 5 inches from where the hips are. So we're talking bottom end of the backside, bottom end of the bottom, which just looks physically hard to do because of how it maybe interrupts your running. And I was told by my son that it's called sagging. Apparently, it's quite a cool thing to do. I mean, could I sound any more like I'm about 60?
No. Tune in next
I did
week
have to double check with him that was the actual word, because I thought if he's stuck me right in to say, yeah, it means that, and I've chucked it around and suddenly I've committed some form of heinous crime, then good. Then it's my farewell appearance.
Yeah, you'll be cancelled, and that'll be the end of that.
And it'll be Ola Aina's fault. That's another thing to put next to his name.
Exactly.
Yeah. You've probably had a better run than you thought you might have done 10 years ago. In fairness,
massively. Christ, yeah. And I've just been blasphemous as well, which got me a telling off on another podcast. So
it really didn't it? You got absolutely chalked off. You were castigated for that, weren't you?
Mm. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah. Go on. I was going to say I could say it was sacrilegious, but then again that gets me bogged down in the whole religious debate and stuff.
Well,
anyway, moving on.
Well, yeah, exactly. Blasphemous Prutts. I did have to edit out our conversation last week. I did have to edit out something you said as well, which I don't normally have to edit our podcast because we generally just crack on with it. But that was particularly comical, and I was like, do I leave it in, or probably, given how touchy some people can be, probably take it out. Anyway, Hull City, I feel like we could probably just regurgitate the podcast we did about this time last year. You know, get somebody in Newcastle in our editing team just to kind of swap out Liam Rossini's name, chuck in Ruben Selles' name, and we could probably get away with everything that we said last year being applicable to this time this year. Prutts, it's another managerial sacking. This time last year it was Liam.
Yeah.
Since then we've had Tim Volter, disaster. Andy Dawson came in for his usual caretaker spell. And now Ruben Selles gone after 6 months in the job. Before we get into Kathyrn, who I'm going to give time to wind up while you're talking.
Just stretching off.
she's already gone with Ola Reina. She's already come in with that. So,
by the way, he said he's just basically had to go at Hull, didn't he? That's why. I'm not just randomly picked on Ola Reina. Like he did an interview saying that Hull was a culture shock to him when he was on loan, and then he asked the interviewer, "Have you been?" Which is basically saying like, it's not a nice place.
When sorry, I'm sorry to get bogged down in the Ola Reina chat. When was he on loan? What year?
It was the Slutsky era. I think we got about 3 players from Chelsea. So we had him, Michael Hector, who was also not very good, but we also had Fikayo Tomori, who was very good. So one of the 3 was decent. And then Slutsky obviously got sacked, and it was Nigel Adkins. And generally things did improve after a while, so he got a bit better. But at the start, it wasn't good.
Is this pre or post COVID?
Pre.
I mean, do we let him off that the world went bananas and he's probably lost his mind off the back of that? Yeah, culture shock. Makes it sound like he was here in the 70s, doesn't it? Remember Hull in the 70s? Yeah, terrible.
No, it was that he came just after City of Culture. So really, he should have got the benefit of it.
Yeah. So he was probably because he was stepping over all those naked people lying on. Was it Whitefrigate? I mean, it's like, what the hell's going on here?
Maybe that was his first day. Yeah.
Anyway, God Almighty. But let's move away from bottoms and talk about the bottom of the table. We chatted about it the other day, didn't we? And it's not surprising, is it? Yet there is an element where you're going, ugh, it's happened in a way that you kind of think that a bit of continuity may help. Again, to call it progress from where City were is probably by definition correct because of the placings and where City found themselves. The fact that, as we again said, without being too cynical, that it was a survival bid built on 3 of the teams completely blowing up and it being a goal difference type scenario that keeps you up, which again, it sounds like I'm being condescending but I'm not. When I've been in situations where clubs have held on by the skin of the teeth, whether you stay up by 2 points, 1 point, 10 goals, 2 goals, you're still up, and then you box that season off and you work out what was good, what was bad, and what was indifferent, and what needs to change, and you move on. And it sounds like I was reading your piece, Baz, another excellent piece, where it was a bit more of a shotgun approach with regards to Liam getting moved on for stylistic reasons and a bit of disappointment from not reaching the playoffs. This sounds like it's a kind of company decision, doesn't it? Ajahn obviously does have sign-off because he's the one who signs the checks, but it sounds like it hasn't been a sense of we didn't like it, knee-jerk reaction, get him out. It sounds like by hook or by crook, it was getting to the end of the season, staying up, and then realising what you want from the manager or what you don't like about what the current manager's doing. So I think it's harsh, but again, trying to quantify what's harsh in football. In modern terms, how long did he have in the job? 6 months? Which, again, pitiful to say, is now considered a relatively decent amount of time, isn't it? Which, again, I just think it pushes City into another off-season and pre-season, wondering who's going to turn up. There's a lot, and again, I'm sure we'll chat about it, about who's available, because I do think City as an entity is a very attractive proposition. I just think something, and it's something that a very good colleague of ours, Burnsy, talks about, that if you scratch the surface from a finances point of view, is that potentially going to put people off? Because City might want to do better, but if they don't have the funds to do better, they'll finish possibly in and around the same place, won't they? Let's be honest.
Kathyrn, you've had 5 minutes there. Go on, unleash.
Primed.
I think it looks worse because of the fact it's the 5th manager in 3 years, isn't it? Like it is bad and it is frustrating. I do think you can, as Prutts said, you can kind of see why they've done it, and I think we've all kind of spoken about in the last kind of few months about how Ruben did and whether it was good enough, and obviously the difficulties that he walked into, and there's a kind of a debate to be had there. But if he'd had his season and then he went afterwards, I think maybe there would be less kind of controversy around it. But I think it's the fact that he was only there a short time. He did manage to keep the club up. I also don't think it was a particularly nice way of. There's never a nice way to sack a manager, but it's the way it's kind of leaking out just after the game when he's just kept the team up, when it was a really kind of nice positive day, and then immediately it's sort of like he's probably gonna leave. Then you kind of have this 2-week period of everyone sort of knowing that, well, he's probably going to leave, and then you're just sort of waiting for them to announce it, and then eventually they announce it after everyone knows he's already going, and it just sort of it didn't kind of sit nice with me, because I do think he gave he gave everything while he was here. He had a nice moment with the fans at Portsmouth, and as much as it was very close and it could have gone the other way, he did manage to keep the club up. And when he walked in, we were bottom of the table, I think, or at least in the bottom 3.
Bottom of the table, yeah.
So he's done what he's asked. At the end of the day, he came in and he kept us up. And to be honest, as much as you could say he should have kept us up weeks before, I guess you have to kind of thank him for doing that job. It all kind of now depends on who they go for and who's making that decision, because I think we know Acun's record of appointing managers hasn't been the best. The fact that they've had 5 in 3 years tells you as much. So what are the managers kind of looking at the situation now? There's always managers that kind of will want jobs, because there's a lot of clubs that are that get through a lot of managers these days. But whether people are looking at this job now and thinking, having potential second thoughts, whereas maybe a year ago after Liam left, even though that sacking looked harsh, they were in a much better position in terms of they'd just finished outside the playoffs. Now managers are going to be looking at it and thinking, do I really want to go in there? So I just think it doesn't paint the club in the best light, but it's all going to depend on who they bring in next, and that's a huge kind of decision for them to make now.
I think, judging by a straw poll of what I saw on social media, and I'm conscious that social media is a very small barometer of fan opinion, and admittedly, a lot of accounts I don't see for my own sanity and mental health. But from what I have seen, I would probably, and Kathyrn, I don't know if you want to kind of add to this as well, but I'd probably say it's about 70-30 in Ruben, as in 70-30 in Ruben shouldn't have been sacked. And we stuck a poll up on our website yesterday afternoon, and already 2,000 people have voted, and just 18% of the 2,000 thought that Ruben should have been sacked. So that kind of gives an indication of where the fan, a selection of the fan base are at. But then it's a funny one, isn't it? Because after the Derby game, there was a clamour on social media again for Ruben potentially being sacked then. That everybody thought that the club were going down at that point, that Ruben hadn't kept them up, and they'd almost written it off because they were in the bottom 3 going into the final game. And Ruben's remit was to keep them in the league first and foremost. And at that point, they thought he'd failed. So they were kind of like, get rid of him. And I think if they'd have gone down, there'd have been that 70-30 might have been a bit different. There would still have been a percentage that would have wanted Ruben in League One because of what he did with Reading in League One. But it's flipped. It has flipped, and I think a lot of it, Prutts, potentially comes from the fan worry about what comes next, because there has been a lot of change in the last year. 3 managers in the space of 12 months. The sacking of Liam, the anniversary was early this week, for example. So I think there's that sense of nervousness about what comes next, as opposed to perhaps Ruben. Burnsley wasn't keen on Ruben as one example. He didn't think Ruben was the guy that could lead City next season. I guess, but fans are worried, aren't they, about what comes next? And there's so many things, the finances and the whole situation around the club just feels really unsettling.
The bit that with the poll and people's reactions right now, I think there would be a bit of sentiment in that, or sentimentality in that, wouldn't there? In the sense of that togetherness that's been felt, does that kind of what you were talking about, Kathyrn, on the final day of it, the celebratory element of what that day was. And you'll get cynics saying, "Oh, what are you doing celebrating staying up and all that," which I've never really bought into, because it's you invest in the team. I mean, literally in some respects, and also as you follow the team and pay to get around and travel vast distances. So sod it if you can celebrate stuff like that, because that's what football is. It's communion, isn't it? It's like, Christ, this has been awful, but right now this feels amazing. And then maybe in the aftermath of that, when you do kind of take a poll of who thinks what, then there is an element of, yeah, but were you there that day at Fratton? You know what I mean? We got there in the end by hook or by crook, and it wasn't pretty, but we survived. And then maybe if you do the same thing in a month, then there is a slightly different balance to that, because people start looking at it a little bit more objectively and professionally, not in the sense of people watching City run professional, but professionally in the sense of where does the club and the team go from here, and whether that man is the right man. Now, it's harsh in the sense, and again, going back to Kathyrn's point, where you bring a man in that's inherited just a big pile of smelly brown stuff, don't you? And kind of go, can you just sort that? And by definition, the sorting of that was staying up. It was nothing other than that, was it? It was not let's make a late surge to the playoffs, even given how good Alex Neil did with Millwall. You know what I mean? There were obvious differences between the two clubs, but it was brought in to sort out the mess that had been created by a combination of the owner and the manager at the time, because it was just that, a mess. There was no clear objective. We heard about a different style of play. Tim chucked out, I don't know, the daft, was it the musical analogies with how you want to play football? Just win games, mate. You know what I mean? Put a team together that looks like it cares and get some decent results in the Championship. So, which is what, in the end, Ruben did. And whether that does end up by staying up on the final day by goal difference, or whether you're home and hosed by several positions and several points, the history books will tell you literally what you need to know. But City fans will know that was the day that they stayed up on the final day at Pompey, and wonder what does come next. So I think there is a bit of sentimentality to the people's take on it. And then after that, it's up to the people that are in charge in the hierarchy of the football club to get this next decision right. Because again, I'm just literally paraphrasing Kathyrn here, because she's the shiniest journalist on this at the shiniest paper. But that sense of what does come next and what City then sound like. I'm not saying for 1 second we're sat here in the same breath as a Watford setup of hiring and firing. But when you talk about number of managers and the years in which those managers have moved on, it starts ticking over into that territory where I've said Hull City's a good job, and I do still believe that. Maybe there's a bit of sentimentality in that for me. But like you say, if a manager thinks, well, I'm going to get 6 months here at best, and for some reason the first list on the remit is style of football, you probably are looking at some quite experienced managers going, don't know, that sounds like you're on a hide into nothing, because by definition, what is attractive football? And very boringly, my take on that would be where you're winning.
Go on, Kathyrn.
I think as well, like, managers will look at it and see Liam Rossini left and then immediately went, and I don't want to bring up Liam again, but he's gone and he's been successful somewhere else. And I know it's a different set of circumstances, but he's gone like that, as Prutts kind of, showed us there.
Been given the tools. It's been given the tools, hasn't he, Kathyrn?
Exactly. And then it looks like
what a manager can do with what he's got.
Yeah, then the club just looks like the problem. It's sort of like, well, other people, you can succeed. Other people that have been there can succeed in other places, but it's the club that's the issue. And that's my concern with how other managers will view it. And there's always managers out there that will take jobs. Like Ruben came in, I know he'd been in a bit of a mess at Reading. He walked into it, bless him. I hope his next job is a bit more kind of calm for him. But he came into he came into a club that was bottom of the table, and he was in the playoffs in League One. And I know it was a step up, but he still came in. There are still going to be managers that want the job, but it's which managers. Is it going to be the ones that the club want? Is it going to be the ones that the fans think, okay, they might do a good job, or is it going to be the ones that are on, maybe have been out of work longer and have not got as many offers on the table and just want to get back into work? That's the kind of concern for me. I'm not expecting Tim Volter to go like that, like Liam. But there's nothing to say Ruben Selles might get a job somewhere else where he's got a bit better circumstances and might do a good job somewhere else. And we're sort of sat here in a year's time thinking, well, there's another manager that we had that we let go and who's done well somewhere else. So yeah, I think it's all going to depend on the managers that they're looking at, and can they convince them that I know what's gone before isn't going to affect you, and this is a new start. But I'm struggling to actually think of manage, like there's managers that I'm thinking of that might but I don't know if they would come to Hull. That's the problem.
Like who? Who do you think? Give us a name.
Well, Danny Roll's desperate to leave Sheffield Wednesday, isn't he? He's basically begging to leave there for a couple of months. But why would he come to us? He's obviously probably on course for much for probably better things. And I know he's been linked with Southampton, but he'd be somebody that would kind of fit the bill of he looks like a good manager and he's done a good job somewhere else. But he's not going to come. He's not going to come from one sort of mess at Sheffield Wednesday to another club that looks like a bit of a mess. Although he wouldn't have to move house, probably. It's close. It's a bit further to Southampton. He'd have to move.
On Danny Roll, he was a manager they looked at post Liam, but I think the compensation package of Danny Roll was huge. I mean, it was quoted to me as something like 5 million. I've since been told it's not quite that high, but it is. It's not far off that. But as you rightly say, Kathyrn, I think Danny Roll's got bigger fish to fry with respect to City, and I think there's talk of Southampton, Leicester. It looks like Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to move on at the end of the season. Roll's been linked with them as well. So Danny Roll would be a great profile, but I just don't think that's a realistic one at this stage.
Russell Martin's another one, but he's been out of work for a little bit. But he's very much similar to the Rosenior playbook, which probably wouldn't suit the owner. I don't know if that's still kind of the primary concern, the style of play.
On that, it's an interesting point, because for me, this style of play is just a fallacy. It really is, and I think the club have got to, or the owner's got to move away from. Look, we all want to see attacking, attractive football. But the reality is, you Hull City in the Championship, you haven't got parachute payments, you haven't got millions of pounds to invest to bring in the players that can do that. And Prutts alluded to this earlier on. You've got to find a way ultimately of winning football matches. And when you win football matches with some degree of regularity, then you can get better players that perhaps can play better football. But first and foremost, and we all know this, in the Championship, you've got to be physical, you've got to be strong, you've got to be fit. You've got to be organised and know your way around the pitch. Know your way to grind out a result and get a result, and however that looks. And sometimes it will be pretty, and there'll be times when it's not pretty. If we're going to hold on to this kind of fanciful Disneyland theory, it sounds like Paul Warne, that we're going to play like amazing football and win 5-0.
Yeah, but is that purely the owner that's saying that? Because I'm just looking at the Championship table here. Leeds have a defined style because they've got the money to pay for that. Burnley, defensive defined style, but they could add to that. Sheffield United, you would say, have a defined style. Sunderland have with the greatest respect, and I was at that again the other night, and it was absolutely phenomenal. A large portion of them getting to the Championship playoff final has been resolute defending. You would absolutely have to say that. Coventry like to dominate possession. That hasn't got them into the playoff final. And then, with the greatest respect to a league that I covered a lot and absolutely adore, tell me someone else who hasn't got money. You know what I mean? Leeds can score at will because they have players that should be able to do that and are paid accordingly. But for everyone else, I don't know. I honestly don't know. So if this must be, and you could probably tell me more of this, Baz, with regards to what the kind of vibe is, as you say, with social media, which, as we know, it can be a small but significant noise in the grander scheme of people not really giving to whatever's about that particular platform. But we all love football, and that over-intellectualization of what football has become now about philosophies and styles and all that. I still think, and again, this is me speaking as a football fan myself. I just want to sit there and see a bit of chaos, because chaos is what makes football interesting. Yeah. Whether it's chaotically going forward or hapless at the back, that's what makes it interesting. Hopefully, you're watching a side that's not hapless at the back, but causes chaos going forward. Now, whether that's deemed to be in a structure or whether that's deemed to be because we've played, I don't know, a false 9 and we've got a pocket for the 10 and you've got inverted wingers, all that stuff, I totally get it, because I spend a lot of time with people that have spent hours and hours and hours and vast amounts of money educating themselves on that. And I've got the utmost respect for people that walk into that and get judged as we judge people every couple of days on a touchline. But without kind of pulling the curtain back of what it all is, it is literally just that, isn't it? You know what I mean? You go there and you think, Today could be crap, or today could be amazing, and it'll be amazing because we've done more things right. It becomes oversimplified in that sense that if City get a group of players that collectively care, which I think there's a heart to that team, absolutely. Defend stoutly because you've got to, because you'll be coming up against better players, and have the odd one or two players that can change your game. Then you've got half a chance. Does that sound too twee or oversimplified? Because from watching it for 25 years, it hasn't really changed in my career span, from what I can see.
No, and if you think of, I know we're jumping miles and miles ahead here, but if you think of like PSG and Barcelona in the Champions League over this season, that's been one of the really refreshing things about them. They've just gone out and played. Yeah, ultimately, they've been well organised and they've worked hard, but they've just gone out and played, and the managers allowed them to go and play and express themselves. And I just think football has become so sanitised. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that Pep Guardiola's to blame, but so many managers want to be Pep Mark II, and they're so rigid in their systems, and they're so focused on their philosophies that they can't see the wood for the trees. And they're asking players to do things and not actually express themselves and just go out and just play with a bit of freedom. And I think ultimately, what the owner really wants is a manager that can do that. But unfortunately, obviously, Liam was very structured in what he wanted to do, very regimented to a certain degree. So was Volta, but in a completely mental way. And even Ruben was very structured in how he wanted his team to play. And like Russell Martin, there's no chance of Russell Martin coming because he will be like Liam. It's so wedded to his philosophy, and the owner is not going to tolerate that. I just don't think he wants. From speaking to him at length, not just in the last kind of week, 24, 40 hours, but over the last couple of years, and pretty much since he came into the club, I just don't think he's going to now go for a philosophy-based manager.
Have you both spoken to the owner, Acun?
Yes.
On a one-to-one basis?
Yes.
Kathyrn?
I spoke to him when I was in a wheelchair because I'd broken my foot, and he had a lot of sympathy for me. That was the last time I spoke to him. I did speak to him before that, but I've not spoken to him recently. Someone I used to work with went to his house in Turkey when he invited loads of journalists when Man United played Fenerbahce, and it sounded as you would expect a trip to Acun's house in Turkey to sound.
Mental.
Sat there petting a tiger in the foyer. Why wouldn't have a tiger on a
random people?
He has VAR on his tennis courts, so when he plays tennis, he can check whether it was in or not, which was brilliant. No, my only one-on-one conversation with Acun was when I was trying to explain how I broke my foot. So not really useful to the conversation. To be honest.
How did you break your foot, out of interest?
Oh, just being clumsy. I told him I broke it playing football because it was just one of those. I thought that was just easier. And then he said, women's biggest enemies, other women. And I just nodded like, yeah. Wow. It was actually a door that I walked into, but yeah.
Jesus. And then you're very tempted to womansplain to him what the patriarchy is, and thought, it's not the time for this, is it, Acun? To be honest, mate. Yeah.
When I was watching the game, courtesy of Hull, I was like, no, I'll just agree with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think, thanks.
God. But the point the question I was going to ask, Baz, is if and it's not trying to compromise your relationship with them or trying to get stuff that's off the record or anything, but that what he wants and what it actually is seemingly are two different things, yet the success that man's had, possibly away from football, then to a degree in football, basically Liam's season of nearly getting into and again, we're talking about Liam again, I'm very, very conscious of that, like you are, Kathyrn, but there's a sense of a man that is seemingly decisive. This sounds a bit arse about face, but decisive in the sense that sometimes he makes the wrong decisions. You know what I mean? So, right, he's the man. Oh, hang on, no, he's not the man. Right, bye. Right, he's the man. Right, no, he's not the man either. Bye. So there's an indecisiveness to his decisiveness, if you know what I mean, isn't there? With regards to who he wants, he'll categorically put in who he wants and sound like there's a real sense of backing there at the outset, and then potentially he's making decisions in real time because that's what football is, isn't it? If he thinks that Ruben hasn't done a good job, then it's again going back to previous man. He's well within his rights to say, well, that did work for a bit, and now it's not. So see you. And if he's got the money to pay people up, or sever contracts, or break contracts, then it's within his power to do it. I just think going back to why I asked about whether you've spoken to him, is his want or need for a type of football based in anything other than entertainment, in inverted commas? Does he have, and I'm not saying he needs to, has he got any historical background, education in what he believes to be the right way to play football, other than, like most of us, watching it for a very long time?
Yeah, I think it's idealistic, isn't it? It's ironic, really, given the fact that he was a driving force in appointing Jose Mourinho at Fenerbahce, which in fairness hasn't really worked out. And Jose is not exactly a manager that's going to play free-flowing, attractive, gung-ho football like we perhaps saw with PSG, with Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool team of the last couple of years or whatever. What I would say is, I said this yesterday, and it kind of got a bit twisted, that he sacked him solely on style of play. He hasn't. He sacked him because he's looked at the final 8 games of the season post Luton, and he didn't feel that they played well enough. He didn't feel that they got the results that they should have done. He felt that in games against, he said to me, particularly games against Luton and Derby at home, and there were others before that, but those two stick in the mind, where they were really negative at times. They didn't create a lot. The setup he felt was wrong. The changes, the substitutions he felt weren't there. And there were performances away at Sheffield Wednesday, away at Watford, away at Swansea. Yesterday, they lost at Swansea to an absolute horrific penalty decision against John Egan when the penalty was given or smacking him in the face. But let's not shy away from the fact that for 45 minutes of that first half, Swansea should have been out of sight. And that, yes, City improved after the goal, but they were hardly knocking on the door and banging it down, as Kathyrn will testify, because she was there in the away end.
Just repeat those teams there about what he thinks about should have won.
Luton 0-1 at home. Watford lost away at Watford. Lost at home to Derby. Yes, they won away at Sheffield Wednesday, but the game was pretty terrible. But they won. That was the most important thing. And obviously they were away at Swansea. I think he looked at that run in and felt that with those 8 games, they should have got more than the points they did. He felt that they should have, given that the players they'd got, the squad they'd got, the team that he'd got, that they should have scored more than 1 goal from open play that was deflected. Abu Kamara against Coventry. They relied on 2 penalties against Preston. They relied on a set play goal against Sheffield Wednesday and at Portsmouth. And I think his worry was, yes, they survived, and that's all great, but they survived on goal difference. And a draw for Luton, as what we've said before, they kind of survived because 3 teams were worse than them. They didn't survive because they went out and grabbed the bull by the horns and made sure they survived by winning games to get them out of it and beat or get something against Derby or get something against Luton. They relied on Luton being beaten basically at West Brom, and I think those final 8 games, he's looked at that, and along with Jared Dublin, the sporting director, and Martin Hodge, who's still not been announced as head of recruitment, but has been working there. Martin Hodge has got a lot of experience by all accounts in football, former player, Sheffield Wednesday, etc. He's worked in recruitment at other clubs in the Championship as well. That they, as a collective, they looked at it and thought, we're not convinced that this guy is good enough to be given the summer, and we might be in a situation next season where we give him the first 10 games, a bit like Volta. We've got a problem, then we have to rip it up again in mid-season. We'd rather change it now and give us the summer to get something out, get another approach. They just weren't convinced by what they saw in that final, pretty much from Luton onwards, having given themselves a chance of survival going. I think they'd gone after the Bristol City draw with 10 men, they'd gone 5 points clear of safety. Then they drew at West Brom, but because Derby beat Plymouth, that went back down to 3. And then from that point on, it was always really nip and tuck. And that was the reason. So style of play was a small part of it in the final weeks. But I think the bigger concern, from what he said to me, was just the way they were really poor, and their performances were really poor in those final weeks. And that is raised massive concerns going forward. But other people would say, well, it was a situation he was in. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question, Prutts.
Yeah, it's just you mentioned those teams there. Luton, you take Luton out of it. Derby possibly because of obviously being a team that's come up and needing to stay up. Given what I've seen from City, apart from that 4-game, was it a 4-game winning streak? So that'd have been around September.
They won 3 in a row.
Yeah, 4 unbeaten won it, and then 3 of those are wins.
Yeah, they went 4 unbeaten before the March international break. They beat Plymouth and Oxford, drew with Bristol City and Plymouth. They won 3 in a row. End of September, beginning of October, they beat Stoke away, Cardiff, and QPR, and that was the one and only time they won more than 2 in a row all season.
So again, going to what has been the quality of output over the course of a season, and again, they'll be breaking this down metrically, which is absolutely correct. But I mean, I don't know what you think, Kathyrn, but the teams there that we're second guessing who they presume they should be beating are all better than City, aren't they? Sheffield Wednesday, Swansea under Alan Sheehan transformed, but they've got some very, very good players. Derby transformed under John Eustace. I think you look at the final table with what I've seen this season from Hull City. Where else would they have finished?
I think there's something to say for the fact that performances were really bad after the international break, and I guess you can lose and still play well, but that Swansea game, for example, it just didn't. It was terrible. The Watford game was sort of similar, but like you say, I mean that's because the squad's not good enough. I think. I do think it was weird, the shift after that international break, and we mentioned it before. And I don't know what happened, if there was more to it, if there was off the field stuff going on. I don't know, but it was like someone pressed a switch, and we just kind of, we'd been on that great run. We had a break, and then we came back, and we just weren't the same team that had played those 4 games where we were sort of, getting them results, grinding them out, not playing brilliantly, but making sure we got the wins. And we just looked a lot more confident, and we came back, immediately lost to Luton. And I don't know, maybe if it was the fact losing to Luton that just kind of spiraled them and they lost all the confidence, and whether that was it, that was the trigger. But yeah, I think we kind of said, didn't we, that the run-in felt like it wasn't too bad of a run-in, but the squad just wasn't good enough at the end of the day. Like it was, you could say on paper it should have been better, but the way that they were playing all season and in the way that they were playing, it wasn't good enough to beat Watford and clubs like that. And Swansea, as you say, they are probably a team that if they'd have been, they were kind of up there at one point earlier in the season before they had that drop. So I just think similar to last season when we said that the team wasn't good enough to get into the playoffs, the team wasn't good enough to finish higher up than the bottom 3.
Prutts, what he did do, and in fairness to Ruben, I think he quickly realised that going forward and attacking wise, they maybe hadn't got the players to play the expansive style of play that he wanted. So he made them tough to beat. In the games, if you look at the table in the time he was in charge, I think that in the 26 games, they were 12th in the table, and defensively they had the 4th best record in the league behind Leeds, Sheffield United, or Leeds, Burnley, and Sheffield United. Only those 3 teams conceded less than City did in that period of 26 games. So he clearly identified, hang on a minute, going forward we ain't got the players. Even after January, with respect, they signed Joe Gowhart, and I think Joe was brilliant, really, really good. But his record at previous clubs wasn't great. So he was never going to come in and score 15 goals in 20 games.
Plus,
so I think
who is in January that's available to come to a team in the bottom 3 in the Championship that's going to score you? If you're scoring that many goals at that level, you're not playing for Hull City, with the greatest respect, and you're not going there in that. That's a really telling stat there, Bats, because that, as much as he's getting judged and kind of assessed, Ruben, in the job that he's done, he's absolutely correct in what he did. We City losing games, shipping goals. What do? You try and do that, which I think, and again, this is not me. This is more of an assumption rather than anything else. And also, having been in teams that have needed to do this, it's marginally easier to stop goals going in at the back to address than to say we're also going to do this going forward. because there's a regimented discipline to defence, which simplifies it for players such as me that kind of just need very, very set goals and instructions. Right, we work as a team, we do this. Whereas going forward is a little bit more instinctive and it's a little bit more off the cuff. I was much better with rules to follow and places to stand and kind of formations to work within than I was beating a man or whipping a ball or putting the ball in the right place. So I can absolutely understand that. And that also does reflect well on him that he's seen that and structurally gone, right, we need to do this. We need to sort this mess out of the back. We need to sort that out. So therein probably goes back to what we've said, and we're not trying to make us sound like smart asses, but there is a very good coach in there in Ruben Selles, and possibly time will tell with different players that there's a very good coach in there with him. But that then the change of what they do going forward has been a discussion for a long period of time at City, hasn't it? About whether you patiently build up or you hit the front a lot quicker. There's a timidity to the way that Hull City have gone about this season going forward that has really, really shown, hasn't it? They're not a free-flowing attacking side, and any team that's down there isn't a free-flowing attacking side because there is that kind of reluctance and fear that if you go forward, you're going to get exposed at the back. So he walks away with his head held high with that. It sounds a little damning him with faint praise, with that stat under his arm, because that's what he did. The three best teams in the Championship, he had the same defense. He was behind them with a defensive record, obviously in a slightly smaller sample size. So amazing work from that point of view. It was just the ability to create, the ability to put teams to the sword has been a problem for City for such a long time. And again, there's a few of the players that I know that have been recruited, and I've got the utmost respect for the level that they're playing at. But they're to come in and score the goals that we needed, you've got to pay money for that. And you're not going to get many of those that you're going to pick up on a free transfer in January or on loan in January. Who ended up being City's top scorer this season?
João Pedro with 6 goals.
6 goals. I mean, it wasn't a vintage year for high scoring centre forwards. What was Joel? He got he almost got to 20 goals. Was he 19? Top scorer for. But then I suppose if you spread the goals around at Leeds United, there'll be several players that are on a decent stack, and then you work your way down. But I mean, that's pretty telling, isn't it? If you brought someone in to score you goals and he gets 6, then whether it's about what pond you can go fishing in or the supermarket you shop in with regards to who you bring in, I don't know. But it's there's just so much about it, and the more you break it down, the more you look into it, you can understand why City as a collective have found themselves in this position. Going back to Kathyrn's point, you then think, well, who then comes in to help progress the club? Because whoever does has to bring in a different. If you want to finish in the same place, keep all the players together and get a pretty decent manager that can set up a team defensively and possibly nick games on the counter attack, both home and away. If you want to progress, then the squad needs addressing. Is the money for that? It's that whole vicious circle of whether you've got the means to be able to change what the outcome is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And on the subject of João Pedro, it looks like he will be leaving. He's out. They've obviously got to confirm their retain list. Well, they've got to confirm to players or out of contract players by Saturday, which tomorrow. It's our understanding that João Pedro is out of contract. The club do have an option, but he's unlikely to take that. I think he wants to, and his family want to go and play somewhere else. So it's unlikely he'll stay at Hull City. Nordin Amrabat's another one, short-term deal signed in January. He's going. Doken Sinek, not played in almost 2 years, expect him to go. Brandon Fleming and Callum Jones are the other two as well. So we'll wait to see what happens with those. Kathyrn, in terms of the new man then, because that's what everybody wants to know now, is the king is dead, long live the king and all that nonsense. We touched on it earlier on about names. Obviously, Prutts mentioned Alex Neil. We spoke a lot about Alex Neil back in December. He was interviewed for the job, excelled. His presentation to Jared and other members of the board I'm told was exceptional. They decided, or the owner decided, to go with Ruben. Alex then went to Millwall. Funny enough, lost to Hull City, but then unbelievably with that Millwall squad, with respect to them, had a chance of getting in the top 6 on the final day. You would expect he's a manager. I know he's in work, but he's a manager they will look at again. Who would you like if of all the managers that are out there, whether they're in work or not, who would be the guy that you think could come in, galvanise the squad over the summer, get them organised, and ultimately get them winning football matches with some help in the transfer market?
I mean, it's someone that divides opinion, but in terms of someone that's got a team out of the Championship and has a record at this level, Steve Cooper's the obvious kind of name that is out of work that they've looked at before, that they've had conversations with. I don't know if he'd be everyone's cup of tea. Again, I don't know whether the football would satisfy the owner's kind of previous needs, if that is still one of his concerns. But he is, at least, you would feel like he would be a safe pair of hands for the Championship, and you would think, oh, okay, at least, we should be a team looking further up rather than looking down if you were managed to get someone like Steve Cooper. I don't know whether he would want to come here. Obviously, he's probably in that situation where he maybe needs a job sooner rather than later, because he's been out of work for a little bit longer. Whether he will have other better offers than somewhere like Hull City, I don't know. I mean, I had to laugh yesterday seeing the Sean Dyche interview with the Overlap. I mean, and he said he wanted a United job, didn't he? Well, he said he would go and get more points, whatever. So, we're probably as good as Man United at this point. I know we're not in a Europa League final, but we might have a chance of getting there. Again, it would never happen. But I would part of me would love to see Sean Dyche at Hull City, but again, it just wouldn't happen. But yeah, for Steve Cooper and we kind of know Russell Martin won't happen, but they would be the two for me with Championship experience that I think could sort of bring something. Cooper's maybe more realistic, but you probably know, Baz, more than me, whether he's somebody that they would consider and whether he's somebody that would take it. I don't know if Alex Neil. I think if I was Alex Neil, I'd be like, nah, you're all right. You could have had me. Could have had me a few months ago, and unless he thinks coming here would be better than staying at Millwall. I don't know what his budget would be like there, but I think there would be a lot more kind of. I think there'd be more. I think fans would accept Alex Neil more now than they would have done in December.
We said that, yeah, definitely. I think when we talked about it, and Prutts obviously spoke glowingly about Alex at Christmas, there was a kind of a groundswell of, oh God, that's dour. But I think now, given which I didn't agree with. I think Alex is a fantastic football manager, and he's obviously done great jobs at Sunderland and Norwich City and Hamilton as well. So I think he'd be a fantastic appointment. There's obviously Miran Muslic at Plymouth, but I believe his release clause is quite significant. But does he want to stay? Does he want to stay in League One? What's the situation there? I know he looked at. There's Arda Turan that he's looked at before. Emre, the former Newcastle midfielder, he's a manager that he's looked at before. Currently in work at Antalyaspor. But I would think that somebody like Turan or Emre would not. I don't think either of those would appease the supporters, and I just don't think they're what City need right now. I think they need somebody like Alex Neil or somebody that, obviously Tony Mowbray's out of the equation. That there's no interest there. But I think somebody like Neil would tick all the boxes because he's been there and done it. There's no fuss. He just gets on with it. He knows how to organise a Championship team and get the best out of players. As we've seen, that Millwall squad, with respect, Prutts, is a fairly limited squad, isn't it? But to go into the final day away at Burnley and even take the lead, have a chance of getting in the top 6 on the final day shows what he's done in a really short space of time.
Yeah, it astounds me to think that, and again, this is slightly retrospective, even though we said it at the time, that, and again, with the greatest respect to the two men that I'll mention, between Alex and Ruben, I have no idea why in that particular moment we're sitting in that particular situation that the choice wouldn't be Alex. I've really no idea why. And I'll always put the caveat in that it's better footballing minds than mine that have actually taken the punt and gone into clubs to make these decisions. But I do not get, like you say, if we'd have heard whispers that had gone in and bombed in an interview, yet you hear he was fantastic, and you're still going, wow. I mean, yet you still didn't appoint him. That it's hypothetical now, and it's hit, and it's after the horse has bolted. But that is a bizarre decision to be made. Kathyrn mentioned Steve Cooper. I think if Steve Cooper wants to come and manage Hull City, you do whatever you do to do that. I know that that annoys me a little bit about how managers can get dismissed. Look at Leicester again, hypothetical, where they were when they got rid of him. Look where they are now. He's a man that utterly transformed Forest. And I know there's a slight sentimentality to that for me and you, Baz, but it took a team that was terrible, absolutely stinking at the wrong end of the division, and utterly transformed them and put them on the path to where they are now. Yes, they changed when they got into the Premier League again. That's kind of the diversion of where that story goes. But if he shows an interest, yes. If Rob Edwards shows an interest, yes. If Russell Martin shows an interest, yes. And I understand that I'm just naming British managers that I have worked with and whose teams I've worked on. The two that you mentioned, Baz, absolutely no idea what they're like as managers, if they're any good. I've seen Rob Edwards do very good things in the Championship. I've seen Russell Martin do very good things in the Championship. I've seen Steve Cooper do very good things in the Championship. And if I'm missing anyone off that list, I wholeheartedly apologise. But anyone getting sniffy about the potential of names like that being linked to Hull City, fourth bottom Hull City who survived by the skin of the teeth after a disastrous couple of decisions at the end of last season, at the start of this one. Again, I'm not telling City fans how to think, but all of those, you've got to have your arms open and say, yeah, please, come and help us out.
Someone mentioned, again, another name, just naming people that I don't think will come at this point, but someone like Gary O'Neill that's out of work.
Again, another one, very good.
Want to step down to the Championship, and if he does, would he want to come to a team that just finished above the relegation zone? But again, it's always interesting with managers, if that the longer you're out of work, the harder it is. But he's actually done. I know at Wolves they were struggling a little bit, but I do think he was hamstrung by the fact they didn't spend any money for quite a long time. He did a very good job at Bournemouth before he left there, so he would be somebody that is out of work. Again, I don't know if he would come, but
he's a manager he's a name that's been given to me as a manager they've looked at or are looking at. But again, I think there's a few managers on the list that they're looking at. I think Gary O'Neill's on there. My big concern is how much influence the likes of Jared, Martin Hodge, and Mustafa have in this appointment. Okay, it was a collective decision this time to get rid of Ruben, and fine, whether you agree or not, that is the decision that's been made. We've got to move on from it. My concern now is the next appointment an adjunct appointment, or is it people feeding into the? Because ultimately, as Prutts will say, the owner has final say. He has to, because he's the guy that pays the bills, and he carries the can, and he's got the shoulders that have to carry the criticism. We'll come on to that shortly in a minute. But how much influence are those people going to have? We saw at Christmas, Alex Neil was the recommendation from the board, kind of, in the sense that he was the one that really impressed, but the owner went with Ruben, and that's fine. That was his decision. And at the time, I think a lot of City fans were very happy to have Ruben. So that is. But I think now it's such a pivotal appointment, and we're almost at a major crossroads in his tenure as owner now. I think he's got to take on board what other people are saying. And if he wants to appoint an Emre, or if he wants to appoint name X, fine. But that's his prerogative, and he'll have to carry the can for that. But I do think he's got to listen to people that he's appointed, people that he's brought in to give an opinion, to do the job, that have got vast Martin Hodge has got more experience in English football than Acun has. Jared is relatively new to English football, but has built up a body of work over a short period of time. You're employing these people to do the job, let them do the job and take advice from them and listen to what they're saying. And if the recommendation is a Miran Mushlik or an Alex Neil or a Gary O'Neill, listen to why, and then have that discussion. Don't just go hell for leather and make an appointment because you think that's yours. I think City are at a critical stage now, and they're not on life support quite after the season, but they need somebody like an Alex Neil that can come in and get them organised. And if Alex Neil's in charge, they're not going to be in the relegation zone. They're going to challenge potentially at the opposite end of the league, and with the right recruitment, getting players back, Balumi, Miller, Mataza, they've got a chance of of being top 10 and pushing further on with good recruitment. If you bring in somebody that's unknown, I'm not saying I'm not writing off managers that have never worked in England at all, because that would be ridiculous. But I just think where City are at now, I'm not sure they can afford to take the risk of an unknown. I think they need a safe pair of hands to undo the damage that's been done over the last 12 months, because we are a year on. We said a year ago, Prutts, Kathyrn, that they were at a massive point. They could undo the work. Liam did a phenomenal amount of good work in that 18 months. And they're at risk of undoing it all. And for me, they've undone it all in the last 12 months, and they cannot afford to go down that path again. They've got to get somebody in that is sensible and can organise that team and get results fundamentally.
It's all of it's risk and reward. It's like signing a player. I mean, you talk about the ones that are about the experience, and I know we get bogged down, and there's fingers pointed at certain sections of the media, and perhaps English football in general, where we talk about having championship experience as it being this be all and end all. And I totally get that that's not the case. Carlos Carvajal didn't have experience of English football. Daniel Farke didn't have experience of English football. David Wagner didn't have experience of English football. Carlos nearly took Wednesday up. The other two took teams up. I mean, the Wagner one, exactly. But I mean, the slightly different perception of what Bielsa is, because you've got Guardiola and Pochettino as disciples that wax lyrical about it. The other slightly different with that. But and that's why when I try and give you my opinion on who we're talking about, it can only come from first-hand experience. So I could pretend to know what Emre does as a manager, but I have absolutely no idea. Absolutely no idea. And I understand if you're listening to this podcast and you're after answers, me saying I've got no idea, or it could be good or it could be bad. That's what we
get you on.
Yeah, exactly. Sitting on the fence. But that's another thing about, in inverted commas, punditry and wanting definitive answers. Football is all just, majority of it's just a punt. Like, let's lob it up in the air, see where it goes. And that's fundamentally, that's not saying everything's just down to luck, because it isn't. Because as I said, many educated people are in football and spend a lot of time and money and effort and strain every sinew. Ruben did. Going back to Kathyrn's point about, he absolutely gave a proper what's it about the job. You could see it in his face. You could hear it in his voice.
He spent 6 months away from his family. Of course he can.
He'd been there 6 months. He'd been there 5 minutes. And you could see how much it hurt him, what he was seeing and how it happened. And he will be no doubt be hurting off the back of this, because he'd be going, I've done the one thing by hook or by crook. Now give me some time to actually push us forward. And he's not going to get that chance. And that, again, we always go back to the owner. It's his prerogative completely. If you're putting £500,000 into a football club, you're a week, you're absolutely calling the shots, which he quite literally is. So that's the bit of where we look to potentially what could be the next manager. Mark Robbins was available at the time as well, wasn't he, when Ruben came in?
Yeah.
So you've also got managers of a certain background with a certain reputation that people kind of like what these men have done. The men that I've mentioned have done unbelievable things in the Championship, which is as we've seen, is a ridiculously hard league to get in, to stay in, and my God, to get out of. Very tough. Brucey made it look very straightforward. Yet now he's deemed to be a dinosaur in realms of the footballing world. So again, it's not me banging the drum for British managers at all, but that my experience primarily is of that. I've spoken to Miran Muslic. What an unbelievably charismatic fella, frighteningly so, and maybe with a bit more time. You got the sense with Plymouth they ran out of games, didn't they, with regards to getting themselves up, and they had a British manager in before that, Wayne Rooney, who was absolutely the wrong appointment, for them. Yet Miron, with no experience of English football, seemed to get it pretty quickly. And if he had another 10 games, you'd have bet they would have been well clear of the bottom three. And again, that's purely hypothetical, because everyone has to play the same games within the same amount of time. I totally get that. But so there's another man there that could galvanise a fan base that's probably sat there scratching his head going, well, what are we? What do we want? Where do we go? What is Hull City with comparison to the City teams that have climbed out of the Championship? Phil Brown's Hull City side, Steve Bruce's Hull City side, better players. You know what I mean? A different atmosphere, a better chemistry of players that had come through the divisions and a sprinkling of stardust once they got to the top end of the Championship and into the Premier League. That's the difference. So what it is now, I don't know, and who leads it. As I said, the names that I took forward. If you're Hull City, you're listening to every single one of what those good men are saying and working out who to get out of all of those.
Kathyrn, before we wrap up, there's an awful lot of abuse, some of it horrendous, which is what you get with social media. It's just a sad byproduct of what the cesspit can be. But from the more reasoned City fans, there is some criticism for the owner. If we park all the abuse, because that's of no relevance, there is some criticism of the owner, again, and understandably so, given the situation the City are in. A lot of good things have been done by the football club since Acun bought the club in January 2022. There's been some poor decisions as well, some really poor decisions. There's concern about the finances, and that's reasonable when a club posts their finances, and you can see they're losing £500,000 a week in the Championship. Where are you at with the owner and what happens next and the situation around the manager?
I think I did see a post comparing him to the previous ownership, which I thought was very unfair, because I think we forget too easily kind of what that was like. And I think for a long time this fan group just wanted an owner to care about the football club and really just sort of feel like someone to come in with the club's best interests at heart. And I do think Acun has that, and I do think he genuinely cares, and I think we questioned that quite a lot under the previous ownership. He's definitely made mistakes, and I think a lot of owners do that. I don't think he's alone in that. And as we've talked about, he's made some bad decisions. He's made some bad managerial appointments. He's wasted some money on players, and all that sort of stuff that a lot of owners do. But you know that he genuinely does care about the football club, and I know that's been questioned a little bit this year with how he's more involved in Fenerbahce. Yeah, okay, maybe I think he's split, he's maybe not here as much, but I also think part of that was down to the fact we weren't winning as many games. I do think he genuinely still cares about where the football club goes and the future of it. And rightly so that some of his decisions have been questioned and criticised. And you just kind of have to hope now that he's got the right group of people around him, and he's maybe learned from his mistakes, and he is maybe going to give other people more control in the decision making, people with maybe a bit more experience of football than him. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think if he learns from those mistakes, I think you can sort of sit there and say, fair enough. The problem for me is going to be if he keeps making the same mistakes over and over again. If he overrules those people around him and brings in his own manager and it doesn't work again, people's patience does wear thin, unfortunately. And that's the nature of football. So I just kind of hope, I can understand why they have made this decision, as frustrating as it is, because he just wanted a bit of stability. There is a logic to the decision. The biggest thing now is who they appoint, and I just hope they take the time, and I hope he takes advice from the people around him and they come to a decision that feels right and isn't kind of, we're not sort of sat here as we were last season sort of questioning the managerial appointment. I just hope he makes that kind of decision with the help of other people around him.
Brilliant. I think that's a fitting way to end. We'll see what happens over the next few days. Before we go, Prutts, just want to mention the playoffs. Congratulations to Greg Doherty and Will Mannion last night. Charlton scored late. So City are guaranteed an extra trip to London next week, which, Kathyrn, I'm sure you'll be delighted about. Charlton or Leyton Orient. I've never been to Brisbane Road, so that'll be a ground tick. So yeah, Charlton or Leyton Orient in the final at Wembley next bank holiday weekend. So City guaranteed, as I say, another trip to London next season. Prutts, just quickly on the playoffs, as we know, you were at the Stadium of Light the other night. That was wild, wasn't it? How do you see the final then? Sheffield United versus Sunderland.
I would initially be leaning towards Sheffield United. They absolutely dispatched Bristol City, didn't they, in their semis? And but then Sunderland's approach shows that they can handle a football team that wants to dominate possession, which is exactly what Coventry set about doing. You do err on the side of a little bit of luck in these big games, and I think there was an element of that Hadji scores that header in the very last minute of normal time, and it's done and dusted, isn't it? But Dan Ballard was absolutely immense at his defensive performance, and then scoring the goal. That's as loud a stadium as I can remember in recent times. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then going into the final, Sheffield United, by virtue of where they finished, literally the third best team in the division, behind the other two. And Sunderland, the job that Regis Labrise has done, I thought got kind of forgotten a little bit, given the fact that they lost 5 on the way into the playoffs. They were, let's be honest, it was a position they found themselves in that City would kill for, wouldn't it? Being in the playoffs, but without momentum. So a wonderful job by him. But I do lean just towards Sheffield United, given their creative depth and the experience that they've got within the side, and obviously Chris Wilder with his experience of getting teams promoted. So it's a game I'm looking forward to. But then all the playoff games I think have been terrific. Not just saying that because it's all normally on Sky, but there've been some cracking games, and to be able to have the privilege to go and work on it at Wembley in a few days' time a week and a bit is just phenomenal, really. So but again, it's without trying to knit it all together on a slightly dour note. It's a place that Hull City fans know well, and they've still got vivid recollections of them going. As I said, I mentioned Carlos Carvajal, but facing that Wednesday side, coming down, dispatching them very straightforwardly, heading back home and back into the Premier League. It seems like a world away now, doesn't it?
Funny old game, Kathyrn, isn't it? To say that City won 3-0 at Sheffield United and won 1-0 at Sunderland, and one of those teams are going to be in the Premier League.
I think someone was saying I think Sheffield United have never won in the playoffs or something like that.
Never.
Yeah, I think this is. I think they will.
The final, yeah.
It was that long. It was we love stats, don't we, at Sky? But that stick was the one that we were gently beating Brentford with and Forest with and teams such as that, and it's got to be snapped at some stage. Are you a bit paranoid, Baz? What's behind your chair?
Right, so I've been turning around because I've had a message to say the postman's been, and we think that the postman's left the side gate open. And I'm constantly looking to see where the puppy is, and she's been sunbathing. She's been sunbathing on the garden path and in the back door, but now I can't see her. So I'm a bit concerned she might have ventured out down the side of the house and out through the. I don't know the gate's open, but I've had a message to say it might be, and so. That's why, if you've been wondering if I've got some kind of like nervous twitch for the last hour, I have been keeping an eye on the puppy who is.
Yeah, like trotting outside at one point.
Yeah, she's growing that quickly. She's almost no longer a puppy. Bless her.
I did hear a screech of tyres, but that might be a different thing.
That was a train going past. Which is probably not. I probably shouldn't say. I know. But yeah, right.
That's funny, Baz.
on that bombshell of the dog kind of going off and.
Meeting its maker.
Yeah.
I'll feel terrible now if you text me. I say I feel terrible. I feel bad for a minute and then move on very quickly.
Move on with your life. Right. That's it from this episode of the 1904 Club podcast. Kathyrn, thank you as always.
Thank you very much.
Prutts, it's always a pleasure.
Pleasure to speak to you too, and obviously we'll mention Fletch in dispatches and Bernsey. Big shout out to him.
He never turned up, Fletch, did he?
Where is he? It says in Ripon. I mean, that's not far from me. He could have bobbed in.
He'll be knocking on. Careful what you wish for. He'll be knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Sending our best wishes to Bernsey. Bless him. He's not very well at the minute. He obviously didn't do the final 2 City games of the season as well. So he's feeling a little under the weather, is Bernsey. So we send our best to him. And we'll keep you posted over the next few days of what happens at the MKM Stadium and if there's any white smoke likely to emerge over the next few days. I don't think there will be. We're not expecting an announcement on the new manager in the next couple of days even, but this is Hull City. You never quite know. But we will keep in touch. So thanks for watching, everybody, as always. And we'll see you again soon. Up those Tigers.